The late afternoon light streamed through the dusty window, cutting the silence of the room with a golden beam that touched the worn leather briefcase. The old man held it with both hands, his trembling fingers caressing the rusty metal clasp. Outside, in the narrow hallway of the assisted living facility, footsteps faded away. 5 pairs of shoes, each with its particular hurry. None returned. Before we delve into this story, leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 10 and tell us which city you're tuning in from. May this moment bring reflection and emotion to your heart. In the twilight of existence, when the body already feels heavy and memory becomes more vivid than the present, the old man lived alone on that property that time had begun to devour. The walls peeled, the roof complained with every rain, and the silence was so dense that sometimes he talked to the shadows just to feel that there was still life inside. 78 years on the road, and now this, just this, the echo of his own steps and the creaking of the floorboards. He no longer expected anything. He had learned not to expect. His children, all 5 of them, had their lives in the big city, their commitments, their urgencies. Visits were rare, spaced out by months that seemed like years. When they came, there was that strange atmosphere, that forced conversation, that glance at the watch that the old man pretended not to notice but noticed very well. He noticed everything. Old age had taken many things from him, but the ability to read people, that it hadn't. It was on a grey Thursday, with the sky heavy with unfallen rain, that the car stopped in front of the house. It wasn't just one car. There were 3. The old man was on the porch, sitting in the rocking chair his wife had given him decades ago, when she was still alive and the house still had laughter. He watched the cars kick up dust on the dirt road, saw the doors open almost simultaneously, saw the 5 of them get out with that posture of having made an important decision. Robert came first. He always came first. The eldest, the pragmatic one, as his mother used to say. Business suit even on a weekday. Leather briefcase under his arm, serious expression. Behind him Sarah, the second, with that smile that never reached her eyes. She had inherited her mother's ability to seem sweet while calculating every move. Then came Frank, the middle one, already on his cell phone before even getting close. He always had his head somewhere else, never truly present. Charles, the 4th, came slower, lighting a cigarette. His life was a mess, full of debts and unkept promises. And finally, Ethan, the youngest, only 26, looking at his siblings to know how to act. The old man didn't get up. He stayed there, rocking slowly, his hands in his lap, waiting. He knew what was coming. Somehow he knew. "Dad." Robert stopped on the first step of the porch, not going all the way up. "We need to talk." "Go ahead. It's better inside." Sarah was already opening the front door, entering without waiting for a reply. They settled in the living room, each choosing a spot as if it were territory. Robert stood, his back to the window. Sarah sat on the sofa, adjusting her skirt. Frank leaned against the wall, still with his cell phone in hand. Charles stayed near the door, smoking, and Ethan sat on the edge of a chair, tense. The old man entered last, slowly, feeling the weight of each step. He sat in his usual armchair, the one with the seat molded perfectly to his body, and waited. "Dad, we talked," Robert began, using that business meeting tone. "And we've come to a conclusion. You can't stay here alone anymore." "I'm fine." "No, you're not." Sarah leaned forward, her voice soft, her smile fixed. "The house is falling apart, and you can barely take care of yourself. We're worried, Dad." The old man looked at her, then at the others. They all avoided his gaze. "We've found a good place," Robert continued, "an assisted living facility in the city. It has nurses, doctors, activities. You'll receive proper care." The words were spoken quickly, like ripping off a band-aid. The decision was already made. It wasn't a conversation, it was a notification. "A nursing home," the old man said softly. "An assisted living residence," Sarah corrected, as if changing the name changed the thing itself. "When?" "Today." Robert was already checking his watch. "We've settled everything. You just need to pack a few things." The silence that fell in the room was heavy. The old man took a deep breath, feeling the air fill his lungs slowly, as if measuring how much air he was still entitled to breathe in that house. He could have screamed. He could have refused. He could have made a scene. But what for? They had come with everything decided. He was just a detail to be resolved. "Can I take my belongings?" "Just the essentials, Dad," Frank said without looking up from his phone. "The room there is small. I only need one thing." The old man stood up, every muscle protesting. "I'll get it." He climbed the stairs. Slowly, his hand on the railing, each step a conquest. In the bedroom he went straight to the old closet, opened the groaning door, and deep inside, under mothballed blankets, was the briefcase. Brown leather, worn with scratches and stains from decades of use. He picked it up, felt the familiar weight, and for a second closed his eyes. Then he went downstairs. When he reached the living room with the briefcase, Robert frowned. His gaze went from the briefcase to his father, from his father to the briefcase, calculating, measuring, evaluating if it was worth arguing. "Are you taking that?" "I am." "It's too big. The car is already full," Robert insisted, his tone impatient. The old man stopped, held the briefcase tighter, and for the first time that entire afternoon he lifted his chin and looked his son in the eyes. "Then I'll take something out of your cars," he said, and for the first time there was firmness in his voice, a firmness that came from somewhere deep, from a time when he still gave orders, still decided, still mattered. The children exchanged glances, surprised by his resistance. Sarah sighed loudly, that sigh of someone who finds everything an exaggeration. Charles shrugged, as if none of it concerned him. Frank barely noticed, already back on his phone. Robert assessed the situation, calculated if it was worth insisting, and decided it wasn't. "Fine," he conceded, but his tone was that of someone doing an immense favor. "Let's go. It's getting late." The old man nodded, pressed the briefcase against his chest, and headed for the cars. The drive was silent, but not the comfortable silence of peace. It was a heavy silence, full of unspoken things, of averted gazes, of held breaths. The old man sat in the back seat of Robert's car, the briefcase on his lap, pressed against his chest as if it were a shield. His hands, stained with age and work, held the metal clasps with a strength that surprised even him. Sarah rode in the front, occasionally glancing in the rearview mirror, and when her eyes met her father's, she would offer some empty comment about the weather or traffic. "Looks like it's going to rain." "Traffic's lighter today." Words that meant nothing, just a way to fill the awkward void that hung in the car. Robert drove with urgency, his fingers drumming on the steering wheel whenever he hit a red light, as if he were late for something far more important. His eyes darted from the traffic to the dashboard clock, from the dashboard to the GPS, always calculating, always measuring time. The others followed in the cars behind. The city appeared on the horizon, that cluster of buildings and concrete that grew as they approached, swallowing the blue sky piece by piece. The old man felt his heart tighten, a pressure in his chest that had nothing to do with health, but with the feeling of farewell. He had never liked big cities. The constant noise, the senseless rush, the lack of breathing room, the smell of exhaust mixed with hot asphalt. But now he was going to live there. Or rather, he was going to be stored there, like an object no longer useful, but that can't be thrown away completely, so it's put in a corner and forgotten. The facility was in an outlying neighborhood, away from the hustle, away from the pulsating life. A large white building, 3 stories of painted concrete, with bars on the windows disguised as protection, but looking exactly like what they were. In bars, a well-kept garden at the entrance, precisely mown grass, colourful flowers planted in symmetrical beds, all very beautiful, all very artificial. A discreet plaque on the wall, gold letters, Sunset Haven. A nice name, even poetic, to hide what it really was. A warehouse, a place where families left their elderly when they became too inconvenient, too burdensome, too real. They got out. The old man stood there, looking at the building, the briefcase in his hand. He knew that once he walked through that door, something would end, not just his life in the old house. Something bigger, something that had no name, but that he felt slipping away like water between his fingers. "Let's go, Dad." Sarah was already at the door. They went inside. A spacious reception area, the smell of disinfectant mixed with artificial flowers. A woman in a white lab coat greeted them with a professional smile. She was already expecting them. Paperwork already filled out. Room already assigned. Everything resolved before he even arrived. Robert signed a few things, spoke quietly with the woman, swiped a card. Transaction complete. "Your room is on the 2nd floor. The woman turned to the old man. "Would you like someone to help with your bag?" "No." He held the briefcase with both hands firmly. The children accompanied him to the room. A long hallway, numbered doors on both sides, heavy silence. The room was small. A twin bed, a closet, a small table, a chair, a window overlooking an inner courtyard. It was clean, it was organized, it was empty. "Well, Dad?" Robert was already backing away, his feet almost out of the room, his body already turning towards the door. "If you need anything, just call, anything at all." But the tone held no commitment, only protocol. It was the kind of phrase you say because you have to, not because you want to. "We'll visit soon." Sarah approached, gave him a quick kiss on the cheek, the kind of kiss that barely touches the skin, leaving no mark or memory. A farewell kiss that was more habit than affection. "Take care, okay?" Frank hadn't even fully entered the room. He was already in the hallway, his cell phone back in his hand, his attention elsewhere. Charles waved from a distance. A lazy, unenergetic wave. Ethan got closer than the others, seemed like he was going to say something. His lips moved, but in the end he didn't. He just looked at his father with that look of someone who knows something is wrong, but doesn't have the courage to admit it. And so they left. They went down the stairs, crossed the hallway, exited through the front door, got into their cars and drove away. Each one back to their own life, without looking back. The old man stood there in the middle of the room, the briefcase in his hand, listening to the sound of the engines fading until they completely disappeared into the city noise. Then, slowly, feeling every joint protest, every muscle ache, he walked to the bed and sat on the edge. He placed the briefcase beside him, his hand still on the worn leather, as if physical contact could prevent it. The last thing he had brought from his previous life, from disappearing too. And he stayed like that, quiet, for a long time. Maybe half an hour, maybe more. Time had stopped making sense. He didn't cry. He had no more tears. They had dried up years ago when his wife died, and he realized that crying changed. Nothing, brought no one back, healed no pain. He just stayed there, feeling the silence of that strange place infiltrate his bones, thinking about how he had ended up there. 78 years of life, 5 children raised with sweat and dedication, a beloved and lost wife, a house built with his own hands, board by board, brick by brick. And now, a small room that smelled of disinfectant, an old briefcase, and the bitter feeling that he had been discarded like something no longer useful, like a broken tool, old furniture, an inconvenient memory. But the briefcase was there, and Inside it, a secret none of them imagined, a secret that would change everything. He still didn't know exactly what to do, but he knew something had just begun. The first few days at the facility passed slowly, each hour dragging as if time had forgotten how to walk. The old man woke early, a lifelong habit of waking with the sun to tend the land. But here there was no land to tend. Only the white ceiling of the room, the empty walls, and the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Footsteps of nurses, of other old folks like him, of people who had also been left there to await the end. He tried to adapt. He went down to the dining room at the right times, sat at a table in the corner, ate without hunger. The food was bland, everything overcooked, too soft, made for those who no longer had teeth or appetite. Around him, other elderly residents talked quietly or remained silent, lost in thoughts no one else wanted to hear. Each person there had a story, but the stories had been filed away along with old clothes and furniture that didn't fit in the small rooms. There were activities: physical therapy on Tuesdays, bingo on Thursdays, movie night on Fridays, always old films that no one really watched because half the audience fell asleep midway. He went, but he didn't participate. He was there, present only in body, his mind far away, in the old house on the porch, in the times when he still had a place to return to. At night, lying in the narrow bed, he looked at the briefcase. He had placed it on the floor, next to the closet, leaning against the wall. Sometimes he would get up, go to it, run his hand over the worn leather, feel its weight when he lifted it slightly. But he didn't open it. Not yet. As if opening it would be admitting something he wasn't yet ready to admit. It was in the second week that he met the benefactor. That was the nickname the old man mentally gave him because he couldn't quite remember his real name. He was one of the staff members, a man in his 40s, thin with an easy smile and kind eyes. Unlike the others who did their jobs on autopilot, this man seemed to genuinely see people, not just old bodies, but people. He appeared one morning when the old man was sitting in the garden on a bench under a shade tree. The garden was beautiful, neatly mown lawn, colorful flowers, but too artificial. It looked like a movie set. "Good morning." The man approached, unhurried. "Mind if I sit?" The old man shrugged, and the man sat. "I'm Roger. I've worked here for about 6 years. He paused for a moment, then continued. "I saw you arrived recently." "I did. Are you settling in?" The old man looked at him, trying to read his intention. But there was no malice, no rush. It was just genuine conversation. "I'm trying. It's tough at first." Roger looked at the garden, moving, leaving the life you know behind. "But it gets better. It always gets a little better." "You speak like someone who knows." "I've seen a lot of people come through here, each with their own pain. But I've also seen many find peace. It's not the life before, but it's still life." They sat there in silence, just listening to the wind in the leaves and a bird singing somewhere. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that doesn't need to be filled with empty words. After that day, Roger started to appear more often. He'd bring an extra coffee, sit for a few minutes when he had time, tell silly stories about the daily goings-on at the facility. He never asked too many questions, never intruded. He was just there, present in a way the old man's children never had been. And the children? They showed no sign, no calls, no visits, no messages, as if they had left the old man there and crossed him off their list of worries, resolved, filed away, forgotten. The old man tried not to think about it, but he did. At night especially, lying in the dark, staring at the ceiling, wondering if any of them even remembered he existed, if any of them missed him, if any of them regretted it. But he knew the answer. He had known since the day they walked into the old house with that posture of having a task to fulfill. They hadn't come to talk, to understand, to ask what he wanted. They came to resolve, and they resolved it. It was on a rainy Saturday afternoon, almost 3 weeks after he had arrived, that the old man finally opened the briefcase. He hadn't planned it. He hadn't chosen the moment. It simply happened. He was alone in his room, the afternoon sunlight streaming through the window, illuminating half the space. He had tried to read a book from the facility's small library, but he couldn't concentrate. The words blurred on the page, and his mind was restless. He got up, went to the briefcase, picked it up, and placed it on the bed. He stared at it for a moment, his hands trembling slightly, not from old age, but from something deeper, fear, expectation. He didn't know. The clasps were stiff, rusted by time. He forced them, and they yielded with a metallic click. He opened the lid slowly, and the first thing he saw was the old fabric lining the interior. Faded plaid, torn in one corner. He knew that fabric. His wife had put it there decades ago when the briefcase was still new and they traveled together. He removed the lining, and underneath, carefully arranged, were the stacks, many stacks, $100 bills held together with already brittle rubber bands perfectly stacked. He took out a stack, felt the weight, ran his thumb over the edges of the bills. They were real, there were many, $6,200,000. His heart pounded. He sat on the bed, still holding the stack, looking at the rest inside the briefcase. He had kept it for so long, a lifetime of savings from hard work, investments that paid off, the sale of land he had inherited, an inheritance from a distant uncle no one knew about. He had gathered it all there, hidden, because he never trusted banks and never wanted anyone to know. It was his secret, his future, the inheritance he was going to leave his children. But now, sitting in that small room in an assisted living facility, abandoned, forgotten, he looked at the money and felt something different. It wasn't relief. It wasn't joy. It was a strange mixture of power and bitterness. They didn't know. The 5 of them had carried the briefcase, thrown it in the trunk, brought it all the way there, and had no idea what they were carrying. They had discarded a fortune along with their father. He chuckled, a low laugh, half sad, half ironic. Life was funny in that twisted way. They abandoned him thinking he had nothing, that he was a burden, a resourceless load. And there he was, sitting on a fortune that would change any of their lives. He slowly closed the briefcase, put it back in the same spot, and sat there for a long time, his mind working, thinking, planning. For the first time in weeks, he felt something he had forgotten how to feel. Purpose. It wasn't going to be revenge. He wasn't a man of revenge, but justice. Justice he understood, and justice they would have. In the days that followed, the old man began to move differently. He had a new energy, discreet but present, Roger noticed. "You're different," he said one morning, bringing an extra coffee as he always did. "Different how?" "I don't know. More present, like you woke up from something." The old man smiled, a small but true smile. "Maybe I did wake up." "That's good." Roger sat next to him on the garden bench. "Being stuck in the past isn't healthy. You have to live what you still have." "You are wise." "Not really. I've just seen a lot, learned. That life goes on even when you think it's over." They stayed there, talking about simple things. The weather, the garden plants, a book Roger was reading. It was good. It was human. It was everything the old man hadn't had in recent years. And it was there, on that bench, with that kind man beside him, that the old man made his decision. He was going to use the money. He was going to use it to show his children who they really were. Not with anger, not with hatred, with truth, pure and simple truth. They would see what they lost. They would understand the magnitude of the choice they made. But before that, he was going to do something none of his children had done. He was going to return kindness with kindness. A few days later, Roger arrived at work and found an envelope in his locker drawer. It had no name, but he knew it was for him. He opened it and found money, not a fortune, but enough to fix his car, which had been broken for months, and buy the medication his mother needed, but his insurance didn't cover. He looked for the old man later, found him in his room. "Was that you?" The old man just smiled. "Why?" "Because you're a good man," the old man said simply, "and good people deserve good things." Roger had tears in his eyes. He tried to return it, but the old man refused. "Accept it. It makes me feel good to know I helped someone who deserves it." And Roger accepted, and from that day on, he and the old man became more than employee and resident. They became friends, real friends. Meanwhile, far away, in their hectic lives full of problems, the 5 children carried on, unaware that a silent storm was brewing, a storm with a name and an address, a storm kept in an old briefcase they had scorned. And that storm was about to reveal truths none of them wanted to face. Robert was in his office on the 13th floor of a mirrored building in the financial district when the phone rang. It was his bank manager. The voice on the other end was polite but firm. The investment he had staked everything on, that real estate venture that seemed guaranteed, had collapsed. Problems with permits, with the construction company, with who knows what else. $300,000 evaporated. He hung up and stared at the computer screen without seeing anything. His leather briefcase lay open on the desk, filled with papers that suddenly seemed useless. He had always prided himself on being the pragmatic one, the one who thought before acting, who calculated risk. But this time he had made a mistake. A big mistake. His administrative assistant knocked on the door, entered with more papers. He gestured for her to leave them on the desk, and she left. Alone again, he ran a hand over his face, feeling the weight of the situation pressing in. He had bills to pay, commitments made, an image to maintain. How was he going to explain this to his wife, to his partners? He thought of his father for a second, remembered the day they left him at the assisted living facility, the old briefcase he insisted on taking. Why did he remember that? He didn't know. Maybe because at that moment he had realized that the old man had nothing, no reserves, no plan B. And now he, Robert, the successful one, was in the same boat. No plan B. Across town, Sarah was sitting in her living room, a large house in an upscale neighborhood, impeccable decor, everything in its place. But the place was crumbling from within. Her husband, a respected entrepreneur, had been caught in a compromising situation. The news hadn't leaked to the papers yet, but it would. It was only a matter of time, and when it did, her social life, that life of dinners and events and photo ops, would collapse like a house of cards. She was on the phone with her attorney, trying to contain the damage. Her voice was controlled, but inside it was panic. Everything she had built, her reputation, her status, the image of a perfect family was threatened, and there was no way to fix it, no way to go back. She hung up the phone and walked to the window. Down below, the garden was perfect, the flowers well tended, everything symmetrical, but it was just a facade, just like her, a facade. She thought of her father. She didn't know why. It had been weeks since she'd thought of him. Since the day they left him there, she had erased it from her mind. Task accomplished, move on. But now, in the midst of the crisis, the image of the old man sitting in that small room appeared in her head, and with it came a pang of something she didn't want to feel. Guilt? No, it couldn't be. She had done the right thing. She had done what was necessary. But the pang wouldn't go away. Frank was in Chicago, a meeting with investors he had rescheduled 3 times. Now he couldn't reschedule again. Business was stalled, cash flow tight, and he needed this meeting. He arrived late, of course, as always. The investors were impatient. He could tell by the way they looked at him when he walked in. The meeting was disastrous. The questions were direct, the numbers didn't add up, and he had no convincing answers for anything. In the end, they said they would think about it, but he knew what "will think about it" meant. It meant no. He left the building, got into his car, and just sat there in the parking lot. His cell phone vibrated with messages, emails, demands. He ignored everything. He just sat there, staring into space, feeling the world close in. He thought of the old house, the property that was still there, sitting empty, with no one. Who was going to take care of it? Who was going to deal with it? He didn't have time. None of them had time. But the problem was there, waiting. And he thought of his father. Briefly, as if swatting a fly, but he thought of him. Was the old man okay? Had anyone called to check? No. No one had called, because it wasn't a priority. It never was. Charles was worse off than all of them. Much worse. His debts had grown, interest was eating up any money that came in, and creditors were pressing. One of them showed up at his studio apartment door, polite but clear. Either he paid or things would get ugly. He tried to call his siblings. Robert didn't answer. Sarah said she couldn't help right now. Frank hung up on him. Ethan didn't even have money to help himself, let alone someone else. Alone, with no way out, he started selling what he had. The TV, the stereo, valuables. It wasn't enough. It never was enough. Lying on the old couch, staring at the cracked ceiling, he thought about how he had gotten there. Wrong choices, one after another, bets that didn't pay off, promises he didn't keep. And he thought of his father, remembered the briefcase. That ridiculous briefcase the old man insisted on taking. Why did he remember that? He didn't know. But he remembered, and he thought, could there have been something inside, some hidden money? But he quickly dismissed the idea. The old man had nothing. If he had, they would have found it when they cleaned out the house. There was nothing, just the old briefcase, and his stubbornness in not letting it go. Ethan was, in the small apartment he rented, trying to study for a college exam, but he couldn't concentrate. The conversation with his older siblings kept circling in his head. They had convinced him it was the right thing, that Dad would be better off there, that they were doing him a favor, but he couldn't shake the image. The old man sitting in that small room, alone, the briefcase beside him, watching them leave without looking back. There was something wrong with it, something he couldn't name, but that hurt. He tried calling the assisted living facility once, asking how his father was. The receptionist said he was fine, adapting, but her voice was automatic, protocol. It said nothing of truth. He hung up and held his phone, not knowing what to do. Did he want to visit? He did, but his siblings had said it was better to wait, give Dad time to adapt, and he believed them. He always believed them. But the guilt was there, small but present. Weeks passed, and each of their problems only grew. Robert had to sell a property to cover losses. Sarah watched her husband's scandal erupt in the media and her social life turned to ashes. Frank lost 2 major clients and had to lay off employees. Charles had his studio apartment raided by court officers. Ethan failed 2 courses and began to question if he would be able to finish college. And not once did any of them call their father, not a single time, as if he no longer existed, as if he had died the day they left him there. But the old man was very much alive, and he was plotting. With Roger's help, who discreetly took him on outings around town when he had time, the old man began to observe. He went to the bank, made small transfers, tested the waters. No one questioned him. The money was his. Everything was in order. He went to a law office Roger recommended, spoke with a trusted attorney. A serious, discreet man who understood what the old man wanted without judgment. The attorney was named Dr. Paul. Grey hair, glasses, the posture of someone who had seen a lot in life. He listened to the whole story, took notes, and in the end nodded. "Are you sure?" he asked, not out of doubt, but because he had to. "Ask." "I am." "It's going to hurt them." "It needs to hurt," the old man said, and there was no anger in his voice, just resignation. "They need to understand." And so, slowly, piece by piece, the old man began to assemble the plan. It wasn't revenge. It was justice. The difference is subtle, but it exists. Revenge is driven by hatred. Justice is driven by truth. He was going to show his children what they had done. He was going to place the raw reality in front of them, unfiltered, without excuse. They would see the briefcase open, the money exposed, and they would understand the magnitude of their mistake. And then he would live his life without them. Because he had learned, in those months of solitude and abandonment, that family isn't blood. Family is who stays, and who stayed was Roger, was Dr. Paul, were the kind nurses at the facility. Those were family. The children, they were just blood, and blood alone is worth nothing. One afternoon, the old man was in the garden when Roger approached. "I see you're planning something." "You see right. May I know what?" The old man looked at him, pondered, and decided to trust him. "I'm going to teach my children a lesson." "What kind of lesson?" "The only one they'll understand. The lesson of truth." Roger was quiet, then smiled. "Then count me in, for whatever you need." "You already are. More than you imagine." And so the net closed in. The old man, Roger, Dr. Paul, 3 men, each with his role, each driven by something different. The old man by justice, Roger by loyalty, Dr. Paul by ethics. And the children? They were far away, each drowning in their own problems, unaware that the storm they had planted was about to break over their heads. A storm held in an old briefcase, a storm made of $100 bills and inconvenient truths. And when that storm arrived, there would be nowhere to run. Autumn arrived slowly, painting the city with shades of brown and yellow. At the assisted living facility, leaves fell in the garden, and someone swept every morning, but there were always more. The old man liked to sit on the bench and watch the leaves fall. There was something comforting in it, in the idea that things fall but always come back. Cycles. Life was made of cycles. Dr. Paul appeared once a week, always discreet, always with his leather briefcase and that serious demeanor. They met in the old man's room, or when the weather was good, in a secluded corner of the garden. Papers were signed, plans were drawn, details were adjusted, all at the right pace, unhurried but without losing focus. "The will is ready," Dr. Paul said one afternoon, taking a document from his briefcase. "Would you like to review it?" The old man took the paper, his eyes scanning it. It was all there, every comma in place, every word carefully chosen. He had dictated it, and Dr. Paul had translated it into legal language, but the essence was his. "It's good." "Are you sure?" "Once signed, that's it. No turning back." "I know." "And are you at peace with this?" The old man remained quiet, looking at the horizon, where the sun began to set. "Peace? I don't know if it's peace, but it's right that I know." Dr. Paul nodded, put the document away. "Then whenever you're ready, we'll finalize it." "Not yet," the old man said. "There's one more thing I need to do first." "What?" "I need them to know. Not afterwards, during. I want to see their faces when they find out." Dr. Paul was surprised. "You want to confront them?" "I want them to understand what they did. There's no point in finding out after I die. It has to be now, while I'm still here. This is going to be painful for them, and it needs to be." Dr. Paul took a deep breath, then agreed. "As you wish. I'll prepare a formal summons, a meeting here with everyone present." "Good. And tell them it's urgent. that it's about inheritance. That will bring them running. I know. The old man smiled without joy. I know very well. As the plans moved forward, the old man began making small gestures, discreet donations, an amount to the facility to improve residents' food, another to a non-profit that cared for abandoned seniors, another to the neighborhood church where Roger lived. Nothing too grand, nothing that would draw too much attention, but enough to make a difference, and people noticed. Comments began to circulate. That old man in room 204 seems he's got some cash put away. I saw him donating to the church. He paid for Mrs. Linda's dog surgery. Rumors, whispers, nothing concrete, but enough to plant seeds of curiosity. One of the comments reached the wrong ears, or the right ones, depending on the perspective. A neighbor from the countryside estate, where the old man used to live, ran into Sarah at the grocery store. Small-town gossip. I saw your father the other day in the city, you know. He was at the bank, talking to the manager. Looked quite well, actually. Sarah thanked her for the information with an automatic smile, but the information stuck. At the bank? Doing what? She mentioned it to her siblings in a family text message thread. Someone saw Dad at the bank. Do any of you know anything? Robert replied, no. Frank didn't even see the message. Charles asked if the old man had money. Ethan remained quiet. The seed was planted. Small, but it was there. Their problems, meanwhile, only worsened. Robert had to take out a bank loan to cover expenses. The interest rate was high, and he knew he was digging a hole, but he had no choice. Sarah was watching her marriage crumble, her husband increasingly distant, the house increasingly empty. Frank lost another major client and was now considering closing his office. Charles received an eviction notice and was living with a friend in a cramped studio apartment. Ethan dropped out of college. He no longer had the mental capacity or money to continue, and none of them, not for a second, thought to call their father, to ask how he was, to offer a visit. The old man had been filed away, forgotten, like a resolved problem that no longer needed attention. But the problem wasn't resolved. It was just waiting. It was on a rainy May afternoon that the summons arrived. 5 white envelopes, sent via certified mail, each with a child's name. Robert received his at the office, Sarah at home, Frank at his company, Charles at his friend's studio apartment, Ethan at the temp job he had found. Each one opened it, read it, and felt their heart race. Urgent meeting summons. Subject, will and inheritance. Location, Sunset Haven. Date, Saturday, 10 in the morning. Mandatory attendance. Robert called Dr. Paul immediately. The administrative assistant said he was in a meeting. He left a message. Dr. Paul did not return the call. He called the assisted living facility, asked for the administration. They said they couldn't give information over the phone. Sarah tried calling her father directly. The room phone rang and rang. No one answered. She left a message at the reception. Tell my father to call me. It's urgent. But the message never arrived, or it arrived and was ignored. Frank messaged the group. Does anyone know what this is about? Charles replied no. Ethan said he received one too. Robert suggested they all go together to resolve it. Sarah agreed. None of them admitted it, but they all thought the same thing. Inheritance. Was the old man going to die? Was he sick, or was he just organizing his affairs? And what did he have to leave? The old house, perhaps, some furniture, nothing of great value. But even so, it was something. Greed? No. They didn't think that way. They thought of it as settling outstanding matters, as taking care of family business, as being responsible. But deep down where the ugly thoughts reside, it was indeed greed. The hope that the old man had something, anything, that would alleviate their situations. Saturday arrived overcast, with the threat of rain. The five met at the entrance of the assisted living facility, each arriving separately, each with their own burden of expectation and fear. Robert in a suit, even though it was Saturday, Sarah in a social dress, impeccable makeup hiding her dark circles. Frank in jeans and a shirt, looking like he hadn't slept well. Charles in wrinkled clothes, unshaven. Ethan, the youngest, trying to appear confident, but failing. They greeted each other quickly, more nods than hugs. They entered together. The receptionist was waiting for them, wrote down their names, asked them to wait. They sat in the waiting room. In silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The door opened and Dr. Paul appeared, serious posture, briefcase in hand, formal greeting. "Good morning. Please follow me." They followed through corridors that seemed longer than they were. They passed closed doors, old people sitting in chairs, nurses who didn't even look up. They arrived at a small meeting room, a table in the center, chairs around it. And at the back of the room, sitting with an upright posture, was the old man. They stopped at the door, surprised. Their father was different, not thin, not hunched, not dejected. He was well, even too well. There was color in his face, a sparkle in his eye, a serenity they had never seen before. And beside him, on the table, was the briefcase. The old, worn leather briefcase, the one they had thrown in the trunk without a second thought. Something in the air of the room changed, an electric tension, a feeling that something big was about to happen. Dr. Paul indicated the chairs. "Please, have a seat." They sat, looking at their father, at the briefcase, at the attorney. No one spoke. The silence was heavy, oppressive, full of unspoken questions. The old man observed them one by one, Robert with his rigid posture, Sarah with her nervous smile, Frank, his eyes already on his phone, Charles biting his nail, Ethan, red with embarrassment. And then, without a word, he reached out, opened the clasps of the briefcase and lifted the lid. The sound was almost inaudible, but the impact was deafening. Inside the briefcase, perfectly arranged, were stacks and stacks of dollars, $100 bills held together with rubber bands, piled like green bricks. The room's light reflected off the paper, creating an almost obscene gleam. The five widened. Their eyes, mouths agape, breath suspended, time stopped. $6,200,000 there, in front of them, the whole time. The old man slowly closed the lid, the sound of the clasp echoing in the silent room, and then, with a calm, firm voice, devoid of anger but with deep sadness, he finally spoke. "You wanted to know about the inheritance?" He looked at each one. "Then let's talk about inheritance." The silence in the room was so thick you could hear the clock on the wall, that monotonous tick-tock marking seconds that felt like hours. The five children stared fixedly at the closed briefcase, as if they could still see through the leather the green gleam of the bills. Charles's hands trembled. Sarah's eyes were wide, her mouth slightly open. Robert had leaned forward, elbows on the table, trying to process. Frank had dropped his cell phone. Ethan was pale, looking like he was about to vomit. The old man let the silence linger. He was in no hurry. He had waited months for this moment. He could wait a few more seconds. Dr. Paul stood nearby, quiet, respectful, letting the old man lead. It was Robert who broke the silence, his voice hoarse, almost inaudible. "Dad, this is real?" The old man finished. "Yes, it is. $6,200,000 in cash, kept in this briefcase that you carried, threw in the trunk, and dumped on my bedroom floor as if it were trash." Sarah shook her head, trying to find words. We didn't know." "I know you didn't know," the old man said, his voice still calm. "Because you never asked. You never wanted to know. You just decided I was a burden and discarded me. It wasn't like that." Sarah defended herself, her voice rising. "We did what was best for you. The house was falling apart. You couldn't take care of yourself alone. You did what was best for yourselves." The old man interrupted, and for the first time there was a thread of hardness in his voice. "I was a problem, an inconvenience. It was easier to leave me here and forget." "We were going to visit," Frank tried. "Were you?" The old man looked at him. "It's been 4 months. 4 months I've been here. How many times did you come? How many times did you call? How many times did you ask if I was well, if I needed anything, if I was lonely?" No one answered. The truth was there, stark and raw, with no room for excuses. Charles was the first to look away. Ethan stared at his own hands. Sarah tried to hold her smile, but it crumbled. Frank looked at his turned-off cell phone. Robert kept staring at his father, trying to find something to say, but he found nothing. The old man continued, softer now, not with anger, but with a sadness that hurt more than any shout. "I saved this money my whole life. I worked until my bones ached. I saved every penny. I invested when it worked out. I saved when it didn't. All of it thinking of you. The inheritance I would leave, the future I would secure." He paused, took a deep breath. "But then you showed me who you are. You showed me that family to you is an obligation. It's something you resolve and file away. You didn't abandon me because I didn't have money. You abandoned me because I was no longer useful. Because old people are work. Because old people get in the way. Because old people remind you that one day you too will be here, waiting for your children to do the same thing." His voice faltered a little at the end, but he composed himself. Sarah began to cry. Not the pretty crying of movies, but the ugly, sobbing, shameful kind. Charles had his head down, his shoulders shaking. Frank rubbed his face with his hands. Robert tried to maintain his composure, but his eyes were red. Ethan cried openly without hiding. "Dad, we made a mistake." Robert finally managed to speak. "We made a big mistake. But we can fix it. We can what?" the old man asked. "Take me out of here? Take me back? Pretend these 4 months didn't exist? Pretend you didn't abandon me?" "We were having problems," Charles tried. "I know about your problems," the old man said, and they were shocked. "I know everything. I know you, Robert, lost money on a bad investment. I know you, Sarah, are watching your marriage end and your reputation stained. I know you, Frank, are losing clients and closing your business. I know you, Charles, are neck-deep in debt. And I know you, Ethan, dropped out of college." How did he know? They didn't understand. But he knew. "I know everything because I wanted to know. Because even after you abandoned me, I still cared. I still wanted to know how you were doing. And you know what hurts most? It's knowing that if you had known about this briefcase before, if you had known about the money, you wouldn't have abandoned me. Not for me. For the money." "That's not true," Sarah protested. "Isn't it?" The old man stared at her. "Then why are you here now? Why did you come running when you received the summons talking about inheritance? It wasn't to see me. It wasn't to know how I'm doing. It was to know what there was to divide." The silence confirmed it. Dr. Paul approached, placed a folder on the table. "Your father hired me 2 months ago," he said, his voice professional, but with a barely disguised tone of disapproval. "We drafted a will. It's all legal, registered, irrevocable." He opened the folder, took out the document. "According to your father's express wishes, the inheritance has been divided as follows. $2 million will be donated to this facility for improvements and expansion of services. 1 million will be divided among 5 charities that care for abandoned seniors. Another 1 million will be allocated to social causes, chosen by Mr. John himself, present here with the assistance of trusted individuals." The children listened, trying to calculate. More than 2 million still remained. The remaining $2,200,000, Dr. Paul continued, and they leaned forward, painful expectation in their eyes, will be the exclusive property of your father for personal use, ensuring comfort, health, and independence for the remainder of his life. After his passing, any remaining amount will be donated to the same institutions mentioned. The realization hit them like a bomb. Nothing. They were going to receive nothing. "Dad, no," Robert began. "It's over." The old man raised his hand. "The meeting is over. You came to know about the inheritance. Now you know. There's nothing for you." "But we're your family," Sarah cried out, her voice desperate. "Family?" the old man repeated, and there was a deep bitterness in the word. "Family stays. Family cares. Family doesn't abandon. You are not my family. You are merely people who share my blood, and blood alone is worth nothing." Charles stood up, desperate. "Dad, I need that money. I'm drowning. I'm going to lose everything." "And what did I lose?" The old man looked at him. "I lost my home, my freedom, my dignity. You took everything from me and threw me here to die forgotten. And now that you discover I had money, now I matter?" "We'll sue," Frank said, anger and desperation mixed. "Try it," Dr. Paul intervened. "The will is registered, signed, witnessed. Your father is in full use of his mental faculties, attested by 3 different doctors. There is no legal loophole, no appeal. It's over." Ethan stood up, tears streaming down his face. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm really, really sorry. We made a mistake. We made a big mistake, but please, not like this." The old man looked at his youngest son, and for the first time, for a split second, the mask of coldness cracked. But he recomposed himself. "Ethan, you are young. You still have time to learn. Learn from this. Learn that family isn't an obligation. It's a choice. That respect isn't given, it's earned. And that money doesn't buy character." He stood up, picked up the briefcase, and walked towards the door. He stopped, turned one last time. "I will live the rest of my life in peace. I will leave here. I will go to a place of my own. I will enjoy every day I have left. I will help people who deserve it. I will be happy. And you? You will have to live knowing that you had everything in your hands and threw it away. Not the money, me. And that is a choice that has no turning back." He left. Dr. Paul closed his folder, gave a dry nod, and followed him out. The 5 remained there in the empty room, devastated. The shock, the shame, the regret, the despair, all mixed into a pain that had no name. Sarah sobbed. Charles punched the table. Frank cursed under his breath. Robert remained motionless, processing. Ethan sat on the floor, his head in his hands. It was over, truly over. Outside the room, in the hallway, the old man paused for a moment, leaned against the wall and took a deep breath. It hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. Roger appeared, touched his shoulder. "Are you okay?" "I am," the old man said. "Everything's okay now." And it was true. For the first time in a long time, everything was okay. The weeks that followed were filled with silence, a heavy silence, laden with different meanings for each of the 5 siblings. They didn't speak after that Saturday. The family text message thread went mute. The calls stopped. The rare gatherings simply ceased to exist. It was as if shame was contagious, and each preferred to deal with it alone. Robert returned to his office the following Monday, but his mind wasn't there. He kept looking out the window, seeing the city below, thinking. The bank loan was due, interest eating away at what was left. He had to decide, sell the company or try to save it. But he couldn't decide anything. The image of the open briefcase, the gleam of the money, his father's voice saying they weren't family, all of it spun in his head without stopping. His wife asked what had happened. He tried to explain but couldn't. How could he explain that they had abandoned their father, that their father had a fortune, and that now they would receive nothing? How to put that into words without sounding like the monster he had discovered himself to be? He tried to work, to focus, to solve things, but it didn't work. One afternoon in the middle of an important meeting, he simply stood up, excused himself, and left. He went to the bathroom, locked himself in a stall and cried. He cried for the first time in years, not for the loss of the money, for the loss of his father, for the realization that he had become something he didn't recognize. Sarah was worse. Her husband's scandal had leaked as she knew it would, and now it was gossip. On every corner, at every party, in every look of false compassion she received. Her friends, the ones she thought were friends, pulled away. The invitations stopped. The phone fell silent. She stayed home, looking at the perfect walls, the expensive furniture, the life she had built that now seemed hollow. She thought of her father. She remembered her childhood when he worked in the hot sun and came home dirty with dirt, but with presents for his children. She remembered her mother saying, "Take care of each other when I'm no longer here." But they hadn't taken care. They hadn't taken care of anything. One night, alone in the living room, illuminated only by the light of the television she wasn't even watching, Sarah picked up the phone. She dialed the assisted living facility number. It rang. The receptionist answered. She asked if she could speak with her father. The receptionist said she would check. Hold music. 2 minutes that felt like an eternity. The receptionist returned. "Mr. John does not wish to speak at this time." Sarah thanked her, hung up, and felt the weight of those words. He does not wish. He didn't wish to speak with her, and she had no right to complain. Frank closed his office. There was no way to keep it going. He laid off the last employees, handed over the keys to the space, and returned home, to the apartment that would soon no longer be his because he couldn't pay the rent anymore. He had always prided himself on his independence, on never asking for help, on fending for himself. But now he was broken, financially and emotionally. He thought about calling his siblings, but what for? They were all in the same hole. He thought about calling his father, but he didn't have the courage. What would he say? "Sorry for abandoning you. Now help me?" No, that would be even worse. He lay on the sofa, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how he had gotten there. Always so busy, always rushing, always with his head somewhere else. He never stopped to see what truly mattered, and now that he saw, it was too late. Charles lost his studio apartment. His friend could no longer help, and he had nowhere to go. He slept in his car for a few days, then in a friend's car, then in a shelter. The fall was quick and brutal. Everything he had built, however little, crumbled, and the worst wasn't the physical misery. It was the moral misery, the certainty that he had caused it, that he had been bad, selfish, ungrateful. He remembered his father working late, saving every penny to educate his children, to give them opportunities. And what had he, Charles, done with the opportunity? He squandered it. He wasted it. He buried it in debts and bad choices. And when his father needed him, he turned his back, sitting on a park bench in dirty clothes and unshaven, Charles cried. He cried with regret, with shame, with pain, and he swore that if he had a chance, a single chance, he would do things differently. But a chance doesn't appear when you want it. It appears when you deserve it, and he didn't deserve it. Ethan was the only one who tried to return to the assisted living facility. 2 weeks after the meeting, he mustered his courage, took 2 buses, and went there. He asked at the reception to see his father. The receptionist checked, came back. "Mr. John is no longer here." "What do you mean he's not here?" "He moved about a week ago." "Where?" "We cannot disclose that information." Ethan insisted, pleaded, but it was no use. His father had left and left no trace, or he did, but not for them. He returned home, devastated. He was the youngest, the one with the least guilt, but who carried the guilt nonetheless. Guilt for not having the courage to disagree with his siblings, for not defending his father, for being an accomplice through his silence. He tried to move on. He went back to school, got a part-time job, tried to rebuild. But the shadow of that day in the meeting room followed him, the image of his father looking at him and saying, "You still have time to learn." He wanted to learn. But learning alone was difficult. Without the reference, without the example, without the presence. While the children each dealt with their own ruin, the old man was starting over. He had left the assisted living facility a week after the meeting with Roger's help, who assisted him in finding a house. It wasn't large, it wasn't luxurious. It was a simple house in a neighboring quiet town with a yard and a porch. It had space to breathe, to plant a few things, to live in peace. He bought some furniture, nothing too elaborate, just the essentials. Comfortable, functional, his own. For the first time in a long time, he had a home. Not an institution, not a storage facility for the elderly, but a home. Roger visited him every week. He'd bring food, chat, sometimes help with a house repair. They had become true friends, the kind who don't need blood to be family. Roger would talk about his mother, his siblings, his daily problems. The old man would give advice, tell stories, laugh. Laugh truly, something he hadn't done in years. Dr. Paul also appeared occasionally to ensure everything was in order, that the money was being well managed, that the donations were being made as planned. And they were. The assisted living facility had renovated the dining room, expanded the common area. The charities had received the money and were making a difference in the lives of many abandoned seniors. Every dollar donated was a dollar well spent. The old man had no regrets, not for a second. The decision was tough, but necessary. The children needed to understand, and if they didn't understand, at least they felt it. Sometimes pain is the only teacher that works. One afternoon, sitting on the porch of his new house, sipping coffee and looking at the yard where he had planted some tomatoes, the old man reflected on life. 78 years. It had been long. It had known joys and sorrows, victories and defeats. He had lost his wife, raised 5 children, worked until his bones ached, accumulated a fortune, and in the end, he had discovered that what mattered wasn't money, wasn't blood family, wasn't material legacy. What mattered was peace, dignity, the freedom to choose how to live the days that remained. He had chosen to live with kindness, with generosity, with respect. He had chosen to help those who deserved it, to be close to those who stayed, to build something good with the time he had. And the children, they had chosen their path. They had abandoned, forgotten, scorned, and now they reaped what they sowed: justice, not revenge, justice. The sun began to set, painting the sky orange and pink. The old man finished his coffee, placed the cup on the small table beside him and closed his eyes. He breathed deeply. He felt the fresh air, the smell of the earth, the good silence. And he smiled. He was at peace. Finally, he was at peace. And that peace no one could take away. Not his children, not time, not the world. It was his. And it was all he needed. 2 years passed. 2 years of silence, of distance, of lives that took different paths. The old man remained in his simple house in the neighboring town, tending to his yard, receiving visits from Roger, living a quiet and dignified life. He was 80 now, his body slower, but his mind still sharp, his heart still capable of feeling. The donations continued. More institutions were helped, more seniors received care, more lives were touched by the money he had saved his entire life. And every time he saw news about an improvement, a completed project, a beneficiary, he felt he had done the right thing. Not for his ego, for the world, to leave something better than he found. Of his children, he heard nothing. He didn't seek them out, nor did they seek him. The cut was clean, definitive. Painful for the old man? Yes, but necessary, because to continue would be to feed a lie, and he was tired of lies. Robert slowly managed to rebuild himself. He sold his company, paid his debts, and started over from scratch. He got a job as a consultant, without the glamour of before, but honest. His wife stayed, and together they rebuilt. Not a financial empire, but something more solid. A real marriage. A simpler life. He thought of his father every day. He had a photo of him on his desk, the only thing he had kept from the old house. Sometimes he would look at the photo and apologize. He knew his father wouldn't hear, but he needed to speak. It was his way of dealing with the weight. Sarah divorced. The marriage couldn't be saved. But with the divorce came a liberation. She stopped trying to keep up appearances, stopped caring what others thought, and began to truly live. She went back to school, studied psychology, and started volunteering at a non-profit organization. She helped people, and helping healed the wound she carried. She also thought of her father. She wanted to call, wanted to ask for forgiveness, but she feared rejection, the pain of hearing no again. So she didn't call. But she held on to the hope that one day, perhaps, she could make amends. Frank lost everything. His apartment, his car, his company, his illusion of success. But at rock bottom he found something he hadn't had in years. Time to think, to re-evaluate, to understand. He found a simple job as a salesperson and began to rebuild. Slowly, unhurriedly, and for the first time, he was present. In his work, in his life, in his relationships. His father was a ghost he carried. A remorse that wouldn't fade, but he learned to live with it. He learned that mistakes cannot be erased, but they can be avoided from being repeated. Charles suffered the most. The fall was brutal, and the climb was painful. He battled addictions, debts, himself. He had relapses. He spent nights sleeping on the street. There were moments when he almost gave up, but something, perhaps the memory of his father, perhaps the guilt, perhaps the desire to prove he was more than that, kept him going. He got a job at an auto repair shop, manual labor, dirty, exhausting, but honest. He started paying off his debts slowly. He stopped drinking. He stopped running. He faced it. And little by little, very little by little, he began to rebuild himself. He didn't return to what he was, but he became something better, something real. Ethan was the only one who tried to find his father. He searched hospitals, records, county clerks' offices. He didn't find him. Or he did, but the information was protected. He tried for months until he understood that his father didn't want to be found. And he respected that. He respected it because he learned, late but learned, that respect is that. It's accepting the will of another, even when it hurts. He went back to school, finished college, got a job. He built his life, but carrying the lesson that family is cultivated, that respect is earned, that love is shown. And he swore that when he had children, he would be different. He would be present. He would care. He would truly love. On a Sunday afternoon, 2.5 years after the meeting, the old man was in his yard when he felt a pain in his chest. It wasn't sharp, it wasn't dramatic, it was just a pain, a deep fatigue. He went inside, sat in his armchair, and breathed slowly. He knew what it was. His body was signaling that it was time. He called Roger, who rushed over. He called Dr. Paul, who also came. They took him to the hospital, but there wasn't much to do. His heart was tired. It had worked 80 years without stopping. It deserved to rest. The doctors did what they could, but it was a matter of time. The old man knew he wasn't afraid. He had lived well, lived. He had done what he believed was right. He had found peace. Death wasn't punishment, it was just the next step. Roger stayed by his side in the hospital, holding his hand. Dr. Paul, too. Both, more than an employee or an attorney, were family. the family he chose. "Do you want me to call your children?" Roger asked softly. The old man thought. For a long moment, he thought. Part of him wanted to see his children one last time. Part of him wanted to forgive, wanted to give them another chance. But the stronger part, the part that had matured in these years, knew that wasn't it. It wasn't about him forgiving, it was about them learning, and calling them now would be robbing them of that lesson. "No," he said, his voice weak but firm. "They made their choice. I made mine. It's all as it should be." Roger squeezed his hand, his eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," the old man said, "for everything. You were more of a son to me than any of them. You don't need to thank me. I do," the old man smiled. "And I want you to know that there's a part for you in the will, not much, but enough for you to care for your mother and have a better life. I don't need—" "I know," the old man interrupted. "That's why you deserve it." Night fell, and with it the old man's breathing grew slower, more spaced. He looked out the hospital window, saw the stars beginning to appear, and felt a profound peace. It had been a long life. It had had its highs and lows. But in the end, it had been worth it. He closed his eyes, squeezed Roger's hand one last time, and let go, without struggle, without agony. He simply went. And so the old man passed away, not surrounded by children and grandchildren as he always imagined it would be, but surrounded by love, true love, the kind that stays. The burial was simple. Few people, but the right ones. Roger, Dr. Paul, some staff from the former assisted living facility, some beneficiaries of the donations, people who had been touched by his kindness, people who truly cried. The children were not informed. They found out later by chance, when an acquaintance mentioned it. The news hit them like a bomb. Robert locked himself in his office and cried. Sarah broke down in therapy. Frank had to leave work. Charles sat on the curb and stayed there motionless. Ethan went to the cemetery days later and stood in front of the grave, not knowing what to say. They had lost their last chance, not to receive an inheritance, to ask for forgiveness, to say they had learned, to try to make amends. And now it was too late, irreversibly late. The will was read a week later. Everything is planned. The institutions received what was allocated. Roger received an amount that changed his and his mother's lives. The children, they received a letter, only one, addressed to all 5 but with individual words for each. Robert received, "Learn that success isn't about accumulating, it's about living with integrity." Sarah received, "True family is built with presence, not with appearances." Frank received, "The time you didn't give doesn't come back. Use well what remains." Charles received, "Starting over is possible, but it requires the courage to be different." Ethan received, "You are young. Don't repeat our mistakes. Be better." And at the end, a message for everyone. "I forgave you, not because you deserved it, but because I deserve peace. But to forgive is not to forget. You made choices. Live with them. And if one day you have children, remember, love isn't an obligation, it's dedication. Don't repeat with me what I didn't do with you. Be better. Goodbye." The letter was read, cried over, kept. Each one took home the weight of the words, the painful clarity of the truth. And life went on. For them, marked by guilt, by regret, by a lesson learned too late. For the world, marked by the institutions the old man helped, by the lives he touched, by the legacy of kindness he left. The briefcase, it remained empty, kept in a donation to a local museum as a symbol that the value of things is not in what they hold, but in what they represent. And that old, worn briefcase represented a life, a choice, a justice. And in the end, on a sunny afternoon, When the leaves fell and the wind blew softly, if someone passed by the simple grave, with his name engraved and 2 dates, they would see a phrase the old man himself had asked to be. And placed there, I lived, I loved, I chose who to stay with, and I died in peace. And it was true, all of it. If this story touched your heart, like, comment, and subscribe. Stories like this deserve to be remembered.